For 10 years, a dog wouldn't stop barking at a strange lump in the backyard. Day and night, the noise never stopped. Everyone thought it was just an old mutt losing its mind, until the ground was finally dug up, and within minutes, someone was on the phone calling 911. What they uncovered wasn't just gas in the dirt. It was a dangerous secret, buried for years, tied to a death that never made sense, and to powerful people willing to do anything to keep the truth hidden. A loyal dog, a grieving family, a town ruled by fear and silence. One discovery sets off a chain of events no one could have imagined. If a single lump in the yard could hide a crime this big. What else has been buried all along? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hollis Keene's tired backyard as Barlow's deep, insistent barking echoed through the neighborhood once again. She pressed her fingers against her temples, trying to massage away the headache that had become as familiar as her old dog's obsession with that strange mound of earth near the back fence. "Barlow, please," she pleaded, her voice carrying a mix of exhaustion and desperation. "Just this once. Give it a rest." The aging hound turned his graying muzzle toward her, his soulful eyes filled with an urgency she couldn't understand. For 10 years, ever since she'd moved into this rundown rental house, Barlow had fixated on that spot. Rain or shine, summer or winter, something about that innocent-looking patch of ground drew him like a magnet. The neighbors had long since lost patience. Mrs. Henderson next door had taken to wearing earplugs during her afternoon garden time. Mr. Peterson across the street had stopped waving hello, replacing friendly greetings with pointed glares. Just yesterday, her landlord had left another threatening voicemail about noise complaints. "If that dog doesn't quiet down, Miss Keene, we'll have to discuss alternative living arrangements." Hollis tugged at her messy ponytail, her sun-faded red hair falling loose around her face. Her thrift store jeans were already dirty from her shift stocking shelves at the local market, so she figured there was no harm in getting a little dirtier. She grabbed the rusty shovel from beside the back steps. "Okay, boy," she said, marching toward the mound. "You win. Let's see what's got you so worked up all these years." Barlow's barking shifted to an eager whine as he watched her approach the spot that had consumed so much of his attention. His tail wagged with nervous energy, and he paced in tight circles around her legs as she positioned the shovel. The ground was harder than she expected, packed down by years of Barlow's circling paws. The first thrust of the shovel barely broke the surface. Hollis leaned her weight into it, her wiry frame straining against the resistance. Finally, the blade sank in with a soft pop. That quote "S" when she heard it, a faint hissing sound, like air escaping a tire. Within seconds, a sickly, sweet, rotten egg smell wafted up from the small hole she'd created. Hollis stumbled backward, her hand covering her nose and mouth. "What in the world?" she muttered through her fingers. The smell was getting stronger, and the hissing had increased to an audible whistle. Barlow backed away too, his ears flat against his head, but his eyes remained fixed on the hole as if to say, "See? I told you something was wrong." With trembling fingers, Hollis pulled her cell phone from her pocket and dialed 911. "I found a gas leak in my backyard," she said when the operator answered. "There's a strong smell and I can hear it hissing." The operator's calm voice helped steady her nerves. "We're dispatching emergency services now. Please move away from the area and keep everyone back until help arrives." It seemed like only minutes before the quiet evening erupted into chaos. Red and blue lights painted her weathered fence in alternating colors as emergency vehicles filled her narrow street. Men and women in bulky hazmat suits swarmed her backyard, carrying equipment she'd never seen before. Hollis stood on her back steps, Barlow pressed against her leg, watching as they worked. The dog had finally stopped barking, but his body remained tense, alert. She reached down to scratch behind his ears. "You knew all along, didn't you, boy?" she whispered. A firefighter approached, his hazmat suit making him look like a creature from another planet. He pulled off his mask, revealing a kind face creased with concern. "Ma'am, we've identified the source. It appears to be a faulty gas line, probably damaged during some previous construction work. We've got the gas company on the way to make repairs." Hollis nodded, but something didn't sit right. The house was old, sure, but she'd never had gas service. Her heating and cooking were all electric, had been since she moved in. She opened her mouth to mention this, but stopped herself. These people were professionals. Surely they knew what they were talking about. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The gas company arrived, more equipment was brought in, and temporary repairs were made. As the sun set, the emergency vehicles began to leave one by one, their lights growing dimmer in the distance. A gas company representative handed her a card with a case number and assured her they would be back in the morning to complete permanent repairs. "You're lucky your dog noticed this," he said. "Could have been much worse if it had gone undetected." Hollis watched him walk away, that nagging feeling of unease growing stronger in her gut. She looked down at Barlow, who sat quietly beside her, his eyes still fixed on the now cordoned-off area of the yard. "Lucky," she repeated softly, remembering all the years she'd dismissed his warnings as simple dog foolishness. How many times had she scolded him, tried to train him to ignore whatever it was he sensed? Her brother Sutter had always said Barlow was special, more perceptive than most dogs. Before the accident that took his life, Sutter had worked with pipeline technology. He'd known things about gas lines and pressure systems that Hollis had. Never understood A's night fell fully over her small backyard. Hollis couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. The official explanation felt too neat, too simple. She thought about Sutter, about Barlow's unwavering devotion to warning them about that spot, about all the little pieces that didn't quite fit together. She crouched down beside her faithful companion, running her hand along his graying muzzle. "What were you really trying to tell us all this time, boy?" Barlow turned his deep brown eyes to meet hers, and in that moment, Hollis knew she couldn't just let this go. Tomorrow she would start asking questions. Tomorrow she would start digging, not just into the earth, but into the past. Something wasn't right here, and after 10 years of Barlow's persistent warnings, she owed it to both her dog and her brother's memory to find out what it was. For now, though, she led Barlow inside, both of them exhausted from the day's events. As she closed the back door, she caught one last glimpse of the disturbed earth in her yard, now marked with warning flags and safety tape. The official explanation might satisfy everyone else, but Hollis Keene knew better. This wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning. The morning after the gas leak discovery, Sheriff Len Kendry's patrol car pulled into Hollis's gravel driveway, kicking up dust as it came to a stop. Through her kitchen window, Hollis watched the tall man unfold himself from the vehicle, his badge glinting in the morning sun. Barlow's urgent barking from the backyard provided an unwelcome soundtrack to the moment. "Miss Keene," Sheriff Kendry called out as he approached her front door, his cowboy boots crunching on the loose gravel. His weathered face wore an expression of barely concealed irritation. "We need to have a word about yesterday's incident." Hollis stepped onto her creaky front porch, wrapping her arms around herself despite the warm morning. "Sheriff, I was just trying to—" "You were tampering with utility infrastructure," he cut her off, pulling out a citation book. "That's a $500 fine." "What?" Hollis felt her stomach drop. "But I reported a legitimate leak. The hazmat team confirmed it." Sheriff Kendry's face hardened. "The utility company has protocols for these situations. You can't just go digging up your yard because your dog won't shut up." He tore off the citation and thrust it toward her. "Stay out of it from now on. The crew's already sealed the crack." Hollis took the paper with trembling fingers. $500 might as well have been $5,000 on her night shift cashier's salary. "This isn't right," she said quietly. "What isn't right is wasting emergency resources because you can't control your dog." The sheriff turned to leave, then paused. "Word of advice? Keep your nose out of things that don't concern you." As his patrol car disappeared down the street, Hollis sank onto her porch steps, the citation crumpling in her grip. Barlow's continued barking from the backyard only heightened her sense of helplessness. Later that afternoon, a sleek black SUV pulled up to her house. A heavy-set man in an expensive suit emerged. Dale Rook, whose name she recognized from local business news. His silver hair was perfectly styled, and his smile seemed practiced as he approached. "Miss Keene," he called out smoothly. "I heard about your trouble with the gas line. I'd like to help." Hollis stood warily. "How do you mean?" Rook pulled out a thick envelope. "I represent certain interests in the fuel transport business. We're prepared to handle any fines and additional repairs needed." He extended the envelope. "All you need to do is sign this simple liability waiver." Something in his too smooth manner set off warning bells in Hollis's mind. "Why would you do that?" "Let's just say we like to be good neighbors." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "It's a simple document. You just agree not to pursue any claims regarding yesterday's incident." Hollis didn't reach for the envelope. "I'd need to have a lawyer look at it first." Rook's expression cooled slightly. "That won't be necessary. It's a standard form." When she still hesitated, he added, "Think about it, Miss Keene. $500 is a lot of money for someone in your situation." The implied insult stung, but it also strengthened her resolve. "Thank you, but no. I'll handle the fine myself." "You're making a mistake," Rook said, his friendly manner evaporating. He tucked the envelope away. "Some problems are better left buried." After he left, Hollis paced her small living room, trying to make sense of it all. Why would a wealthy businessman care about a simple gas leak in her backyard? Barlow's persistent barking drew her to the kitchen window. The utility crew had filled in her excavation and tamped down the earth, but her old dog remained fixated on that spot. As evening approached, a county fire department truck parked quietly across the street. A stocky man in a plain work shirt crossed to her yard. His tired eyes and military short dark hair gave him a serious appearance. "Miss Keene?" he asked. "I'm Tiernan Boyd, fire investigator. Mind if we talk?" She led him to the porch, where he spoke in low tones. "I reviewed the pressure readings from yesterday's leak. They don't match what we'd expect from a simple crack." Hollis leaned forward. "What does that mean?" "It means something's not adding up." He glanced around before continuing. "Listen, I can't officially investigate without cause, but keep your eyes open. And," he hesitated, "maybe trust your dog's instincts." After Tiernan left, Hollis stood in her backyard watching Barlow, who continued his vigilant barking at the covered spot. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, but she felt no peace in the beautiful evening. Instead, a growing certainty settled in her gut. Something was very wrong here, and powerful people wanted to keep it hidden. She knelt beside Barlow, running her fingers through his graying fur. "What are you trying to tell me, old friend?" she whispered. His only response was another determined bark at the suspicious ground, his watchful duty continuing even as darkness fell. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hollis's backyard as she watched Barlow continue his relentless barking at the now patched spot of earth. The memory of her brother Sutter flooded back, as vivid as if it were yesterday instead of 9 years ago. She could still see him clearly, crouched down beside a much younger Barlow, his work boots caked with red clay soil as he trained the eager hound. "Listen up, boy," Sutter had said, his voice gentle but firm. "This here's bad ground. You smell that? That's what you need to warn about. He'd created controlled scenarios, teaching Barlow to recognize the distinct odor of natural gas seepage, rewarding him with treats and praise when he barked at the right spots. Hollis wrapped her arms around herself, fighting back tears as she remembered how proud Sutter had been of Barlow's progress. He's a natural, he'd told her, beaming. Best leak detection system you could ask for. Better than half the equipment we use on the job. But now, watching Barlow's determined vigil, something clicked in Hollis's mind. The dog hadn't just been being stubborn all these years. He'd been trying to tell her something. Something Sutter had trained him to recognize. Something important enough that Barlow had kept at it for nearly a decade. "What were you trying to tell me, Sutter?" she whispered, her voice catching. The official report had claimed her brother died in an alcohol-related accident, his truck found wrapped around a tree on a back road. But Sutter had been meticulous about safety, especially when it came to drinking and driving. It had never sat right with her. A knock at her back door startled her from her thoughts. Tiernan Boyd stood there, holding a manila folder and wearing an expression that suggested he hadn't slept much. "Miss Keene," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I've been reviewing the readings from yesterday. There's something you need to see." She led him to her kitchen table, where he spread out several papers covered in numbers and graphs. "These are the pressure readings from your property and the surrounding area," he explained, pointing to various lines on the charts. "See this pattern here? It's not consistent with a natural leak or age-related deterioration." Hollis leaned closer, trying to make sense of the technical data. "What does that mean? These fluctuations?" Tiernan traced a finger along an irregular pattern. "They suggest intentional manipulation. Someone's been siphoning gas from the main line and they've set up some kind of bypass system to hide it." Barlow's barking seemed to grow more insistent from the yard. Hollis felt a chill run down her spine despite the warm evening air. "My brother," she said slowly. "He worked the pipelines. He was always talking about maintaining line integrity, about watching for signs of tampering." Tiernan's eyes sharpened with interest. "Your brother?" "Sutter Keene. He died 9 years ago." Hollis swallowed hard. "He's the one who trained Barlow to detect gas leaks. Called it bad ground." She gestured toward the window where they could see the old hound still maintaining his post. "Barlow's been barking at that spot since before Sutter died." Understanding dawned in Tiernan's tired eyes. "And the official cause of death? Drunk driving accident, but..." Hollis shook her head. "It never made sense. Sutter was religious about not drinking and driving. He'd seen too many pipeline accidents caused by impaired workers." They both jumped as Barlow let out a particularly sharp series of barks. Through the window, they could see him pawing at the ground near the patched area. "The thing is," Tiernan said carefully, "this kind of siphoning operation, it would take someone with insider knowledge, someone who knows the system intimately." "Someone. Like a pipeline technician," Hollis finished, her heart pounding. "Someone who might have discovered something they weren't supposed to see." She stared out at Barlow, faithful Barlow, who had never stopped trying to deliver her brother's last warning. For 9 years, he'd been telling her something was wrong, and she hadn't understood until now. "These readings," Tiernan continued, shuffling through more papers, "they're not isolated to your property. I've found similar anomalies at 3 other locations in the county, all of them showing the same pattern of deliberate diversion." Hollis felt her hands begin to shake. "This is bigger than just my backyard, isn't it?" Tiernan nodded grimly. "Much bigger. And if your brother discovered something like this back then..." The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Hollis thought about the tree they'd said Sutter's truck had hit, about the alcohol they'd claimed was in his system, about all the questions that had never been properly answered. "Barlow knew," she whispered, watching her old dog continue his vigilant patrol. "He's been trying to tell me all this time, just like Sutter taught him, about the bad ground, about the danger underneath. In that moment, Hollis felt something shift inside her, grief giving way to determination. Her brother's death might have been ruled an accident, but Barlow's unwavering warning suggested otherwise. The gas leak in her yard wasn't just a coincidence. It was a thread that, when pulled, might unravel everything she'd been told about the night she lost her brother. Tiernan gathered his papers, his movements deliberate. "Miss Keene, I should warn you. If what we're thinking is correct, asking questions could be dangerous." Hollis watched Barlow, still faithfully standing guard over the patch of earth that held so many secrets. "My brother's voice has been silenced for 9 years," she said quietly, but Barlow never stopped speaking for him. "I think it's time I started listening." The morning sun beat down on Hollis and Tiernan as they traced the perimeter of her backyard, following Barlow's excited movements. The old hound would stop, bark intensely at specific spots, then move on to the next location with determined purpose. Tiernan marked each spot with small orange flags, creating a peculiar pattern that stretched toward the quarry road. "There's definitely something systematic about this," Tiernan said, wiping sweat from his brow. He pulled out a worn county planning map from his back pocket. "These points Barlow's marking, they're following the old pipeline route. Hollis watched as Barlow continued his patrol, his gray muzzle close to the ground. "Sutter used to paint survey stakes yellow and orange, said it helped him track maintenance points." She paused, squinting at the distant quarry road. "And you know what? I've been seeing Rook's tankers out there at odd hours. Always thought it was strange they'd run loads that late." They followed the trail of flags, pushing through tall grass until they reached the gravel shoulder of the quarry road. Tiernan crouched down, brushing aside some dead leaves to reveal a small metal cap painted industrial gray. "Look at this. It's new hardware, but it's been deliberately aged to look old. Someone's gone to a lot of trouble to hide this." "Those tankers," Hollis said slowly, pieces clicking into place. "They're not just making deliveries, are they?" "No," Tiernan agreed grimly. "They're making collections." Later that afternoon, they staked out the local diner where Rook's drivers usually took their breaks. Hollis recognized Ephraim Cole immediately. He had that nervous energy about him, fingers drumming against his coffee cup while his eyes darted around the nearly empty restaurant. "Let me handle this," Hollis whispered to Tiernan. "He looks scared. Enough already." She approached Cole's booth, sliding in across from him. His coffee cup clattered against its saucer. "Miss Keene," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want any trouble." "Neither do I, Ephraim," Hollis said softly. "But I need to know about the night runs to the quarry road." Cole's face went pale. He glanced toward the door, then back at Hollis. "I can't, Mr. Rook. He's got ways of knowing when people talk." "My brother Sutter knew something was wrong with those lines," Hollis pressed. "And now he's dead. Please, Ephraim, help me understand what's happening." The driver's hands trembled as he wrapped them around his coffee cup. After a long moment, he spoke so quietly, Hollis had to lean in to hear. "Sometimes we get signals. Lights flashing from the trees near certain spots. That means there's product waiting in hidden tanks. We're supposed to top off there." He swallowed hard. "Been going on for years." Back at Hollis's house, she and Tiernan spread out Sutter's old work photos on her kitchen table. Among them were shots of survey stakes he'd marked, the same distinctive orange and yellow paint they'd found traces of earlier. "Look at this," Tiernan said, laying out a grid pattern using the photos. "Every spot Barlow's been barking at matches up with these old survey points. Your brother wasn't just marking maintenance spots, he was documenting tap locations." Hollis felt her throat tighten as she overlaid Tiernan's map with the photos. Sutter knew. He was training Barlow to find these spots because he'd discovered the theft operation. Her hands clenched into fists, and Rook made sure he couldn't tell anyone. They worked late into the evening, piecing together the evidence. The pattern was clear now. a sophisticated siphoning operation using the old pipeline network with carefully hidden taps that could be accessed on signal. Rooks, tankers would make legitimate deliveries during the day, then return at night to collect the stolen fuel. "This is why the pressure readings never made sense," Tiernan said, arranging his documentation. "The system's being deliberately bled. That leak in your yard, it wasn't an accident. It was part of their extraction network." Barlow padded over to Hollis, resting his graying head on her lap. She scratched behind his ears, tears welling in her eyes. "You've been trying to tell us all along, haven't you, boy? Just like Sutter taught you." The old hound's tail thumped against the floor, his soulful eyes fixed on hers with unwavering loyalty. Outside, a tanker's engine rumbled in the distance, heading toward the quarry road under cover of darkness. "What do we do now?" Hollis asked, watching Tiernan organize their evidence. "We build our case," he replied firmly. "Your brother left us a map. Barlow kept the warning alive. Now we follow where they lead us. And we make sure Rook can't bury the truth this time." The scope of the scheme was staggering. Years of systematic theft, countless gallons of fuel stolen through an invisible network of taps, all hidden in plain sight. And at the center of it all was Dale Rook, whose tankers moved through the night like ghost ships, collecting their illegal cargo while the town slept. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Hollis's yard when the sound of tires crunching on gravel shattered the quiet. Sheriff Kendry's patrol car skidded to a stop, kicking up dust. He burst from the vehicle, face red with anger, clutching papers in his meaty fist. "Hollis Keene!" he bellowed, storming up her walkway. "You're in violation of multiple ordinances!" Hollis stood her ground on the porch, heart pounding but chin raised. Barlow pressed against her leg, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "This is a legal raid notice!" Kendry spat, thrusting the papers at her. "You've been caught trespassing on utility property and interfering with official operations. We're shutting you down." As if on cue, the lights in her house flickered and died. The familiar hum of her refrigerator fell silent. Hollis felt the isolation closing in around her like a trap. "You can't do this," she said, voice steady despite her trembling hands. "I have rights." "Rights?" Kendry laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You've got nothing but trouble, girl. This is your last warning." A commotion from the back of her property drew their attention. Through the growing dusk, Hollis spotted movement near the tree line. Rook's men, setting something ablaze. The dry brush caught quickly, flames leaping hungrily from branch to branch. "What are you doing?" Hollis demanded, but Kendry was already retreating to his car. "Sometimes accidents happen," he called over his shoulder. "Especially to folks who don't mind their own business." The fire spread with frightening speed, eating through the parched vegetation toward her house. Smoke began to fill the air, thick and choking. Hollis fumbled for her phone, but the screen remained dark. No signal. "Hollis!" Tiernan's voice cut through the crackling flames. He appeared from around the side of the house, face streaked with soot. "They're trying to destroy evidence!" Barlow suddenly charged down the porch steps, barking frantically at a spot near the foundation. The dog's urgency was different this time. Desperate, insistent. "There must be another valve," Tiernan shouted. "If the fire reaches it—" He didn't need to finish. Hollis could picture the explosion that would result if the flames found another gas leak. The heat was becoming unbearable as the fire advanced. "Here," she called, dropping to her hands and knees. The space beneath her porch was tight, but Barlow was already squirming through the lattice. Nose leading the way, Tiernan followed her under the house, the rough wooden beams scraping their backs as they crawled through spider webs and decades of dust. Barlow's nose pressed against a patch of dirt, paws scratching urgently. "There!" Tiernan's flashlight beam caught the dull gleam of metal. A second valve, just like the one in the yard. Partially buried, but definitely active. The wood. Above them grew warm as the fire approached. Smoke seeped through the cracks, making their eyes water and lungs burn. Hollis's fingers scrabbled in the dirt, exposing more of the valve while Tiernan worked to turn it. "It's stuck," he grunted, straining against the corroded metal. The heat intensified. A beam crackled ominously overhead. Hollis added her strength to his, both of them pushing with everything they had. For one terrifying moment, nothing happened. Then, with a screech of protest, the valve turned. The faint hiss of gas cut off just as flames began licking at the porch edges. "Out! Now!" Tiernan shoved her toward the lattice. They burst from beneath. The porch, gasping and coughing, mere moments before the structure caught fire. Barlow emerged last, fur gray with dust, but tail wagging. The wail of fire trucks approached in the distance, far too late to save her home. Hollis watched helplessly as the flames consumed her porch, her garden, everything she owned. But she was alive. They all were. And now they had proof of just how far Rook would go to protect his secret. "We need to document everything," Tiernan said grimly, pulling her away from the inferno. "This wasn't an accident. It was attempted. Murder." Hollis nodded, clutching Barlow's collar for support. The old dog had saved their lives again, just as he'd tried to warn them all along. Through the smoke and chaos, one thing became crystal clear. There was no turning back now. The truth had to come out, no matter the cost. Dawn crept over the scorched earth of Hollis's backyard, the acrid smell of smoke still hanging heavy in the morning air. She sat on her front steps, wrapped in an old blanket that Tiernan had brought from his truck, while Barlow pressed close against her side. The aging hound hadn't left her since they'd escaped the fire last night. "I can't believe we almost—" Hollis's voice cracked as she stared at the blackened ground. Her hand still trembled when she thought about how close they'd come to disaster. If Barlow hadn't led them to that second valve under the porch. Tiernan sat beside her, his shoulder offering quiet support. "But we didn't. Thanks to your dog here." He reached over to scratch behind Barlow's ears. The old hound leaned into the touch but kept his watchful eyes on the yard. Something clicked in Hollis's mind as she watched Barlow. 10 years. For 10 years, he'd been barking at specific spots around town, spots everyone had dismissed as random fixations of an aging dog. But they weren't random at all. "Tiernan," she whispered suddenly, sitting up straighter. "I need Sutter's old survey maps, the ones we found in Mom's garage last week." He nodded and retrieved the worn tube from his truck. They spread the faded papers across the porch boards, weighing down the corners with stones. Hollis's fingers traced the careful markings her brother had made, dots and crosses in fading red paint that she'd always assumed were standard survey notations. "Look at this." She pointed to a series of marks that formed a pattern across the township grid. "These aren't regular survey markers. Sutter was mapping something else entirely." Tiernan leaned in closer, his brow furrowed. "The spots where Barlow always barks. They match exactly." Hollis's voice shook with realization. "Every single one. Sutter trained Barlow to detect gas leaks, remember? But he wasn't just training him for regular maintenance work. He was creating a living record." She stood up suddenly, pacing the porch as the pieces fell into place. Sutter must have discovered the siphoning operation. He couldn't go to the authorities. They were probably already compromised. So he did the next best thing. He taught Barlow to mark the spots, knowing the dog would keep the warning alive long after. Her voice broke, and Tiernan stood to steady her. "After his accident," he finished grimly. It wasn't an accident at all. Hollis turned to look at Barlow, who met her gaze with those steady, knowing eyes. "Was it, boy? You've been trying to tell us all along. Carrying Sutter's last message. Waiting for someone to finally listen." Barlow's tail thumped once against the porch boards, and he gave a soft whine that broke Hollis's heart. All these years, the loyal dog had kept his vigil, enduring ridicule and complaints, never wavering from his appointed task. "The timing fits," Tiernan said, pulling out his notebook. "Sutter's death was 9 years ago, right after these survey marks were made, and Rook's operation really took off about 8 years ago, according to the county records." Hollis felt sick. They killed him because he knew too much. Then they just carried on, thinking his evidence died with him. She knelt beside Barlow, burying her face in his graying fur. "But they didn't count on you, did they, old friend?" Tiernan gathered the maps carefully, rolling them back into their protective tube. "Hollis, this is bigger than local law enforcement. Now, with these maps, Barlow's consistent behavior pattern, and the pressure readings I took yesterday, we've got enough to take to the State Pipeline Bureau." "Will they listen?" Hollis asked, remembering how easily local officials had dismissed her concerns. "They have to. This isn't just about theft anymore, it's about murder. And unlike Sheriff Kendry, the state investigators don't answer to Dale Rook's pocket." Hollis looked at the scorched earth of her yard, testament to how far Rook would go to protect his operation. Then she looked at Barlow, faithful guardian of her brother's last truth, and felt steel enter her spine. "Sutter tried to stop them alone," she said quietly. "That's what got him killed. But we're not alone, are we?" She reached for Tiernan's hand, drawing strength from his solid presence. "We have each other, and we have proof." Tiernan squeezed her hand. "We'll need to move fast. After last night's fire, they know we're onto them. The State Bureau has an office in Capital City. It's about 3 hours from here. We should go today." Hollis nodded, determination replacing fear in her heart. "Sutter died trying to expose this. Barlow spent 10 years keeping his warning alive. It's time we finished what my brother started." She stood up straighter, feeling the weight of the moment, but also its rightness. Everything, Barlow's persistence, her own stubborn refusal to be silenced, Tiernan's quiet support, had led to this revelation. Her brother's death would not go unanswered. His message, carried so faithfully by his loyal dog, would finally be heard. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the State Pipeline Bureau's makeshift command center. Hollis rubbed her tired eyes, studying the detailed maps spread across the conference table. Red dots marked every location where Barlow had alerted them to potential siphon points. Her brother Sutter's old survey markers had helped them piece together the entire network. "Everything's in position," Tiernan said, quietly, coming to stand beside her. His normally steady voice held a note of tension. "The Bureau's surveillance teams are stationed at all the key points along the quarry road." Hollis nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. "And Ephraim?" "He just called in. Rook's ordered a midnight top-off. 3 tankers." Tiernan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You sure you want to be here for this? No one would blame you if—" "I need to see it through," Hollis interrupted firmly. "For Sutter." The hours crawled by as they waited in the command center. Technicians monitored pressure readings while state agents maintained radio contact from their hidden positions. At 11:30, they began the carefully controlled bleed of the line, creating the exact pressure drop that would trigger Rook's usual theft operation. Ephraim had explained how it worked. The crews would notice the pressure change and move in with their tankers, thinking it was business as usual. But tonight would be different. "Movement at checkpoint 3, crackled a voice over the radio. 2 tankers approaching from the north access road. Hollis's fingers dug into the edge of the table. Beside her, Tiernan tensed. 3rd tanker confirmed at checkpoint 5. Another agent reported. "They're taking the bait." The next 45 minutes were excruciating. They watched through night vision feeds as Rook's crews began their illegal operation, completely unaware they were being monitored. The siphon teams worked, with practiced efficiency, connecting their equipment to the hidden taps. All units hold position, the bureau chief ordered through the radio. Wait until they're fully committed. Hollis could barely breathe. This was it. The moment that would either validate everything they'd discovered or fall apart completely. She thought of Barlow at home, faithfully guarding those spots in her yard all these years, carrying Sutter's message until someone finally listened. At exactly 12:23 in the morning, the bureau chief gave the signal. All units move in. Execute now. The night vision feeds erupted with activity as state agents emerged from their hiding spots, surrounding the tankers and crews. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Commands echoed across the radios as officers moved in with military precision. Hands where we can see them. Step away from the equipment. You're under arrest. The siphon crews, caught completely off guard, offered no resistance. One by one, they were cuffed and led away while evidence teams documented everything. The tankers were seized, their contents providing irrefutable proof of the theft operation. Hollis watched it all unfold with tears in her eyes. I can't believe it's really happening, she whispered. Tiernan squeezed her shoulder. You did it, Hollis. You wouldn't let it go, even when everyone told you to back off. You knew something was wrong, and you kept pushing. The bureau chief approached them, a satisfied smile on his weathered face. Miss Keene, we've got them dead to rights. The documentation, the equipment, the tankers, it's all rock-solid evidence. This operation is officially shut down. What about Rook? Hollis asked. We're moving on his offices now, the chief replied. Between the physical evidence and testimony from the crews we've arrested, his empire's crumbling as we speak. Hollis felt a weight lift from her shoulders, a weight she'd been carrying since Sutter's death. She turned to Tiernan, who was watching her with quiet pride. Thank you, she said softly, for believing me when no one else would. He shook his head. You did all the hard work. I just helped connect some dots. The command center buzzed with activity as reports continued coming in. More arrests were being made across the county as the full scope of Rook's operation was exposed. Years of theft and corruption were finally being dragged into the light. Ephraim arrived at the bureau office an hour later, looking both nervous and relieved. They never suspected a thing, he said. Rook's been running this scheme so long he thought he was untouchable. You did the right thing, Hollis told him. It couldn't have worked without your help. He nodded, managing a small smile. Your brother? He tried to stop this too, didn't he? That's why... Yes, Hollis said quietly. And now we've finished what he started. As the sun began to rise, Hollis stood at the window of the command center, watching the first hints of dawn color, the sky. The night's operation had dealt a devastating blow to Rook's criminal enterprise. Tankers were impounded, crews were in custody, and investigators were swarming through years of fraudulent records. Her first real victory against the man who had caused so much harm felt both surreal and deeply satisfying. She thought of Barlow, waiting at home, finally vindicated after all these years of trying to warn them. She thought of Sutter, whose death would soon be reinvestigated with the truth finally coming to light. The bureau chief approached with a stack of preliminary reports. This is just the beginning, Miss Keene. We're going to need your continued cooperation as we build the case. Whatever you need, Hollis replied firmly. I'm not going anywhere. Morning after the sting operation, Hollis woke to an unusually quiet house. Barlow wasn't at his usual spot by her bed. Her heart skipped a beat as she called out, Barlow? But there was no responding bark or click of nails on the floor. A text message lit up her phone screen. Her breath caught when she saw it was from her father Townsend's number. The message was simple, but chilling. Quarry Catwalk. Come alone or they both die. Her hands trembled as she dialed Tiernan's number. Someone has my dad and Barlow, she managed to say, her voice cracking. Hollis, wait for me. This has to be Rook. I can't. The message said to come alone. She ended the call, grabbed her keys, and rushed to her truck. The quarry loomed ahead, its steep walls casting long shadows in the early morning light. The metal catwalk stretched across the deepest part of the pit, like a rusty skeleton. As Hollis climbed the access ladder, each rung felt like another step toward disaster. Dale Rook stood at the center of the catwalk, his silver hair gleaming in the sun. Behind him, Townsend Keene sat tied to a chair, his weathered face bruised but defiant. Barlow lay motionless nearby, though Hollis could see his chest rising and falling. "Miss Keene," Rook called out, his voice carrying across the void. "So glad you could join our little family reunion." "Let them go," Hollis said, taking careful steps forward. The catwalk swayed slightly under her feet. "This is between you and me." Rook's practiced smile didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, but family is everything, isn't it? Just like your brother Sutter. Such a shame about his accident." He pulled out his phone and showed her a live video feed of her street. "I've opened the main valve under your neighborhood. One spark, and all that evidence you've been gathering goes up in flames, along with half the block." Townsend struggled against his bonds. "Don't listen to him, Hollis." "Quiet," Rook snapped, then turned back to Hollis. "It's simple, really. Call off the investigation. Tell the Bureau it was all a mistake. Or watch everything you care about burn." The sound of footsteps on metal made them all turn. Tiernan appeared at the far end of the catwalk, gun drawn. "It's over, Rook." But Rook was ready. Two of his men emerged from behind the quarry equipment, training their weapons on Tiernan. In seconds, they had him disarmed and on his knees. "Nobody had to get hurt," Rook said, his facade of civility cracking. "I built this town, provided jobs, and you want to tear it all down over some missing fuel? You killed my brother," Hollis said, her voice steady despite her fear. "He found out about your operation, didn't he? Sutter was idealistic. Like you." Rook moved closer to Townsend. He couldn't see the bigger picture. "Now make the call, or watch your father follow in his son's footsteps." Hollis looked at her father, seeing the same stubborn pride that had driven them apart after Sutter's death. But now there was something else in his eyes. Regret and a desperate need to protect his daughter. "I'm sorry, Hollis," Townsend said softly. "I should have believed in Sutter. Should have believed in you." The moment hung between them, years of pain and misunderstanding dissolving in the face of this crisis. Barlow stirred slightly, whimpering, and Hollis felt tears spring to her eyes. Rook pulled out a phone and held it toward her. "Make the call. Tell them you were wrong about everything." Hollis stared at the phone, her mind racing. Behind Rook, she could see Tiernan struggling against his captors, trying to signal something with his eyes. The weight of her brother's death, her father's life, and the safety of her entire neighborhood pressed down on her like a physical force. The catwalk groaned in the morning wind, and somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail. Hollis, S. heart, pounded as she stared at the massive valve wheel near the quarry wall. Her mind raced back to that summer day 9 years ago when Sutter had shown her the emergency floodgate system. "This whole place can be underwater in minutes," he'd said with a grin. "Great for putting out fires." Back then, she'd thought he was just showing off his technical knowledge. Now she understood. He'd been leaving her another clue. Through the dim light, she could see her father Townsend tied to a support beam, with Rook standing nearby. The acrid smell of gas was getting stronger by the second. Tiernan lay trapped under a fallen metal truss, his face contorted in pain, but his eyes fierce with determination. "Do it, Hollis," Tiernan called out. "The gas cloud is spreading. We don't have much time." Rook sneered, taking a step toward her. "Touch that valve and I'll—" But before he could finish his threat, a gray blur launched through the air. Barlow, who had broken free from his restraints, sank his teeth into Rook's arm. The old dog's years of protective instinct exploded into action as he dragged the larger man backward. "Get off me, you mangy!" Rook's curse was cut short as he stumbled. Trying to shake the determined hound loose, Dot Hollis didn't waste the precious seconds Barlow had bought her. She sprinted to the giant wheel, throwing her whole body weight against it. The mechanism was stiff from disuse, resisting her efforts. Her muscles screamed as she pushed harder, remembering Sutter's instructions. "Clockwise 3 full turns to open the gates." 1 turn. The wheel groaned in protest. 2 turns. She could hear Rook cursing and struggling with Barlow behind her. "Almost there!" Tiernan shouted encouragement, still pinned, but watching intently. 3 turns. With a deep rumbling sound, the floodgates began to open. Water from the quarry's reservoir rushed through the ancient channels, following the paths Sutter had designed years ago. The torrent swept across the ground where the gas was seeping, creating a barrier between the spreading cloud and any potential ignition sources. Rook had finally managed to throw Barlow off, but the delay had been costly. The sound of vehicles and shouting voices echoed from the quarry entrance. State agents who had been monitoring the situation swarmed in with guns drawn. "Dale Rook!" a commanding voice boomed through a megaphone. "You're surrounded! Stand down immediately!" Rook's face twisted with fury as he realized his scheme was crumbling. He reached for something in his jacket, but Barlow was on him again, knocking him off balance. The agents closed in swiftly, securing him before he could make another move. A's. Some officers helped free Townsend and Tiernan, others approached with evidence bags containing mobile phones and recording devices. "We've got the calls, Miss Keene," one agent told Hollis. "Sheriff Kendry's conversations with Rook over the past month. He won't be able to deny his involvement now." The water continued to flow, dissolving the last traces of gas into harmless ripples. Hollis sank to her knees, exhausted. Barlow limped over to her, his muzzle grayed but his eyes bright with the same determination he'd shown for 10 years of barking at danger spots. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his fur. "Good boy," she whispered. "You were right all along. You kept Sutter's warning alive until I finally understood." Tiernan, now free from the truss and being checked by paramedics, reached over to squeeze her hand. "You did it, Hollis. You finished what your brother started." Her father, rubbing his wrists where the ropes had been, moved closer. "I should have listened to you both, you and Sutter. All these years." His voice cracked with emotion. Through the quarry entrance, they could see Sheriff Kendry being led to a patrol car in handcuffs, his badge already removed. More agents were seizing documents from Rook's office, building the case that would dismantle his entire operation. The morning sun began to peek over the quarry walls, casting long shadows across the wet ground. Hollis looked at the flood control system, Sutter's last gift to her, and felt a deep sense of peace settling over her. Her brother's death hadn't been in vain. His careful planning, Barlow's persistence, and her determination had finally brought the truth to light. "Let's go home," she said softly to Barlow, who wagged his tail wearily but happily. The old dog had kept his promise to Sutter, protecting his sister until she could protect herself. Together, they had transformed his decade-long warning into justice. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Dale Rook and Sheriff Len Kendry were led out in handcuffs. Their arraignment had lasted barely 30 minutes, but the impact would echo through the community for years to come. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Recorded conversations, financial records, and testimony from multiple witnesses painted a clear picture of their decade-long fuel siphoning operation. Hollis watched from the back of the courtroom, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Tiernan sat beside her, his steady presence a comfort as the judge read out the lengthy list of charges: conspiracy, theft, environmental violations, and most significantly, obstruction of justice in the death of Sutter Keene. The state moves to posthumously clear the record of Sutter Keene. the prosecutor announced, her voice firm. Evidence shows conclusively that Mr. Keene's death was not the result of drunk driving, but rather a deliberate act to silence his discovery of the illegal siphoning operation. Tears welled in Hollis's eyes as 9 years of shame were finally lifted from her brother's name. Beside her, she felt her father Townsend's shoulders shake with silent sobs. The stigma that had torn their family apart was finally being erased. After the hearing, in the quiet of their family home, Townsend took Hollis's hands in his weathered ones. "I was wrong," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "So wrong about your brother. I let my pride and anger blind me to the truth. Can you forgive me?" Hollis wrapped her arms around her father, feeling the years of distance between them begin to melt away. "There's nothing to forgive, Dad. We were all hurting. Sutter would want us to heal now." The media circus that followed was intense. Reporters camped outside Hollis's house, eager for interviews about the woman who had brought down a corrupt empire. But Hollis had no interest in the spotlight. Instead, she found peace in a new direction that honored her brother's legacy. Working. With Tiernan, she began training dogs to detect gas leaks, starting with Barlow as their first success story. The old dog seemed to take pride in showing the younger pups how to track the subtle sense of danger. The local pipeline authority officially contracted their services, turning Sutter's original insight into a legitimate safety program. "You're good at this," Tiernan told her one afternoon as they watched a young German shepherd successfully identify a test leak. "You have your brother's instincts." Hollis smiled, feeling more at peace than she had in years. "We're making something good out of all this," she said. "That's what matters." On a crisp autumn morning, Hollis stood in her backyard, the place where everything had started. The spot where Barlow had barked so insistently was now marked by something special, a carved stone memorial. Townsend had crafted it himself, his stonemason skills creating something both beautiful and lasting. The stone was simple but elegant, with just 2 letters carved deep into its surface, SK. Below them, smaller text read, "His truth could not be silenced." Hollis knelt beside the stone, running her fingers over the carved letters. Barlow lay nearby, his gray muzzle resting on his paws, watching her with knowing eyes. Tiernan stood quietly behind her, his hand gentle on her shoulder. "Your brother would be proud," Tiernan said softly, "not just of bringing them to justice, but of how you've turned it into something that helps others." "Sometimes I wonder if he knew," Hollis replied. "If he somehow knew Barlow would keep trying to tell us, keep marking those spots until someone finally listened." The autumn breeze rustled through the trees, carrying away the last traces of summer. In the distance, they could hear the sound of training dogs working with their handlers, a new generation of protectors learning to keep people safe. Townsend joined them in the yard, carrying 3 cups of coffee. He settled onto the old garden bench, looking at the memorial stone with clear eyes. "Your brother always said the truth finds its way out," he remembered. "Took us long enough to hear it, but he was right." Hollis watched as Barlow got up and went to lay his head on her father's knee, something he hadn't done since before Sutter died. The simple gesture seemed to mark their family's healing as much as any words could. "We don't need everyone knowing our business," Hollis said, thinking of the reporters who still called occasionally. "This is enough. Just us, remembering him, the right way, doing good work in his name." The morning sun caught the carved letters on the stone, making them stand out sharp and clear. SK, initials that had once been tarnished by false accusations, now stood as a testament to vindication and justice. In this quiet backyard where it had all begun, Hollis felt the circle complete itself. Her brother's voice had finally been heard, and in hearing it, she had found not just justice, but a new purpose, and the healing of old wounds. The work ahead would be quiet but meaningful. Training dogs to protect others, preventing the kind of corruption that had claimed her brother's life. With Tiernan beside her and her father's relationship restored, Hollis knew she had found her path forward. In the end, that was the greatest justice of all. Not just the punishment of the guilty, but the restoration of what had been broken. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.